Nigeria was once Africa's largest economy, but has dropped to the fourth largest economy just within 2 years. Since transitioning back to democracy in 1999, the country experienced a period of economic growth and political stability and an upward economic class mobility for a while. Unfortunately, that stability did not last long at all. Today, many economists warn that Nigeria is rapidly moving in the wrong direction altogether, and it's expected that this trend will persist for several years. Recently, as well, large scale protests erupted over the skyrocketing cost of living, widespread hunger, and rising insecurity in the nation. How bad is this situation? And why has it not received the media attention it deserves globally, at least in my estimation? In this episode, I sat down with a very good friend of mine, Adini Yadinka, a human resource specialist with over a decade of experience in the industry, to examine these issues. We also reflect on personal stories and experiences growing up in Nigeria and navigating the broken educational system in Nigeria over several years. I believe you'll enjoy the light-hearted nature of our conversation on this episode, especially if you've lived on that part of the world before, somewhere in the continent of Africa or maybe in Nigeria. Please share your thoughts and experiences, and I'll be sure to respond to them all. If you also enjoy this episode, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. That way many people get to see it through the algorithm, and subscribe to the channel also for more insightful conversations like this. Well, let's get into it. When I think back now at the situation going through school, like you say, it's over a decade ago now that we're talking about. One, the living condition, that's the most woeful thing I can imagine right now. I went back to Nigeria a few years ago, and man, when I saw that, I couldn't believe that was what we lived through. We knew something was wrong, but I probably didn't know it was that bad that time. And the living condition is one, but then the education, like you said, the day-to-day passing down the knowledge was also not anything bearable. The facilities were very poor. I remember first year, right? First year, all the engineering programs together. I was checking the other day because I was explaining to my wife actually the situation, what it looked like. And the ETF building, for instance, in Futa, the seating capacity was like 800. But how many of us were there?
Almost 2,000. Almost 2,000 persons have to come to, that's all. And you have to wake up early to actually make it to the front seat to even be able to hear what your lecturer is trying to tell you.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And then you make it there. Let's say you leave the hostel like 6 o'clock or 6:30 for a 7 a.m. lecture. And then people have taken seats with their notebooks and whatnot. And then the fights break out.
Oh my God. Giving me those memories are not that's something that I just want to remember. You laugh about it now because it's good memory at this point in your life, but it's for the future of the country. It actually is really, really sad, and because the population is not getting better. You understand,
right?
The population is not that we have lesser students in school. Trust me, we have a lot of numbers of courses now that even in engineering that has been added from the time we left school up to this time. In case you know, so how do you want to ensure that?
How do you allocate resources now?
So
as the population increases.
So the government, if any nation that wants to move forward, must invest in education. If there's anything we want to discuss in this session, is that we need to come to that point that the government of Nigeria really need that that promptness to know that we need to invest in education. It's very important.
So I think on one hand is the government investing in education. On the other hand is the private sector. Like I went through grad school. I actually never received government funding, as it were. And the universities here are actually not that funded by the government. They might have projects that are in partnership with the government, but the primary source of funding for the university is coming from the students, from the donors, and from the private sector. So profs also have this kind of agreement, or like you seek funding to take care of your project, and you look for companies that will, a group of companies, and sometimes you get government grants as well. Like I was funded on some government grants in partnership with the private sector while I was in grad school, but we don't have such things in Nigeria. All the rest of those companies, MTN, Globalcom, and the rest of them, the only partnership is with what's this one? BB Nigeria. What do you call that?
I think it's PP Niger. They call it PP Niger. Yeah,
right.
That PP Niger.
Yeah. Like
you're right, because also a company in Nigeria is actually a profitable venture. Most of those grants that you talked about are given by organizations that are looking forward to the development of a country more than just profits. And so if MTN wants to fund a student in Futa, the school we went to, what's the need for MTN? First,
right?
You understand. We can actually talk about it because we understand the way it works in Canada.
Right.
On the long term, at the end of the day, the company we enjoy, the country we enjoy, but that's on the long term.
Right. But it's not as long term as it sounds, right? Like 4 years is not all that long term. A bachelor's degree in Nigeria, in engineering, for instance, it would take you 5 years. So in 5 years, if MTN invests in, say, electrical engineering, or in their electronics, or in computer science, in 5 years, they're already reaping the harvest. You also have internships, which you can do in partnership with the industry, right? So while the student is going through school, you're funding the prof. Usually this is not done for bachelor students, I should say, though. This is done at professional level. Yeah, and I think that's where we should strike the difference. The difference is that bachelor's education, it needs to be funded
by the government.
I don't know. Do you think it's the government though? Because it's not the government. Like, man, schooling is expensive here. The average school in Canada is 20,000 a year for foreigners.
For
the average.
Okay.
In fact, there is schools like Carleton, like York University in your Toronto, University of Toronto,
So
that you could pay like 40,000.
How does it work for citizens?
It's a little less. It's a little less. Like in the university I went to, for instance, the undergrad you could pay maybe like 12,000, but I think there was almost a 10,000 international fee there that you have to pay per year. Yeah,
I think that is the balance for Nigeria. Probably as we speak today, you won't find international students coming to Nigeria to come and study. Probably.
Well, like we had one.
Like
Amadu.
Amadu is from Benin Republic. I guess I remember those days. Amadu is from Benin Republic, and you can't compare. As at that time, Benin Republic it's even as at that time you can't compare Benin Republic to Nigeria. But I don't know what is it today anyway. But for me, what is important is that at the bachelor's level, at the undergraduate level, I think the government really needs to invest in that education for Nigerians, because we are in a dilemma in that country. And if it's not fixed by education, the government will lose more. You understand? And so they are doing well. To be candid, let's give kudos to the Nigerian government, as at least at the level of what we enjoyed, what we call education. But it's not enough to actually take Nigeria out of the situation we currently have. We need to put that investment. So at the level of postgraduate, the system you talked about can really work. You understand? That's when we can now find solution to that problem. How can we bridge that distance? But at the level of undergraduates, it is a must. The government have to do that. Yeah.
So speaking about the dilemma now, we were talking earlier on, we were talking about data. I think things make sense to people generally when you speak in terms of data. And I was also curious, what does the data say about schooling about employment. You're in the employment field
Yeah.
now. I would actually like to come back to how you even transitioned from engineering to HR.
Yeah.
Which is very, but we'll come back to that. I'm curious. We never
Okay.
sat down to
to
talk about this. So we put together the data now from Nigerian Bureau of from Nigerian Statistics of Bureau. The population in Nigeria right now is about 220 million people on paper. It could be different. And now the employment data, which you know more about, the employment data over the last 20 years in Nigeria also shows that the working age population in Nigeria is about 122 million people.
Yeah.
What is a working age population, by the way?
Okay, so when it comes to employment, when you say a working age population for a country like Nigeria, it's people who are within the age of 15 to 65 years old. So it's 15 or 65 or 63, I think. But I think it's 65 as we speak today. 15 to 65 years. So every person in Nigeria that is within the age of 15 to 65 would be classified to be within the working age population.
So 122 million people.
Yeah,
that is out of the 218 million people. Those are the people that can work. And they should be working, all things being equal.
No, so that's the labor force participation that should be working. So still out of the 122 million people, which is the working age population, you have the military folks. They don't, in any country, you don't count your military folks as working age population. They are separated.
The government property.
Government property. They are not owned by civilians. So you don't count them as working age population.
Right.
You also probably people who are incapacitated, probably
disabled.
Right. That's the word. Thank you. And so you don't count them as, so you don't count those people. A lot of factors which I can't remember vividly. You have to take them out from that working age population.
I see.
But as we speak in Nigeria today, the labor force population is 75 million people.
75 million
based
people
on data,
who should be working. Okay. And now you have, out of that 75 million people now, we're scaling it down now, the number of them who are gainfully employed, the data you were showing me earlier is about 35 million
people,
which is just about, give or take, that's like half of that.
Half of that population.
So that means, can we say about 35 million people are not unemployed at all?
Yeah, that's the meaning. But you also have to put in context people who are, who have, partly employed. And what that means is that you get a job today. Probably it's just a short-term job. You do it today, by tomorrow the job is gone. It's a contract job, or probably you help somebody to just provide a service. They pay you just daily. You don't know what next tomorrow. So you put those people as people who are partly employed. It's not continuous. The job is not continuous for them. It's something that is not, so you classify that kind of employment as partly. You won't put them for any nation. You put them, it's a good one, but it's not sustainable.
Right. So a bus driver in Lagos,
thank you so much. Employed? That's partly employed.
So what about the conductor and the agbero?
They're also partly employed. Because definitely it's not tomorrow. They can come to the park and they will tell them that no, there's nothing for today. The boss is it's only the owner of the bus that can say that he was in business. But for them, they are partly employed. It's nothing is sure.
So now the population that is unemployed that I see is about 20 million people. So out of 75 million people who should be employed, 20 million are not employed. And by the way, that's like half of Canada's population. So I can imagine like half of Canada not working at all.
That's a disaster.
That's like you said nothing to even say that's a disaster.
And for Larry, what is interesting about that data is that for you to understand that what that means is that those people, they wake up every morning, they don't know what to do. Not that, there's nothing to do. That's the meaning, so nothing to do. There's no source of income. They don't know where the next meal is coming from. So that is a basis for every social vices you can ever think of. So it's
so
scary.
It increases crime rate in the nation. You will find theft, you will find break-ins and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah. That it's because okay. So when we talk about terrorism in Nigeria, for instance, today, and you ask how much they pay to those people, somebody who doesn't have anything to do, you're offering the person 25,000 naira rather. Apologies, 25,000 naira to to go to a village and
And kidnap people. Is that cheap?
It's not cheap, but the person doesn't have anything to do. 25,000 naira is a lot of money for the person that doesn't have anything to do.
Oh.
You understand what I'm trying to say? So it's a situation where if you don't have anything to do, it's the biggest disaster that can happen.
Right.
So it takes off your self-esteem. You cannot think rationally. You make decisions that normally you should not make, basically. So a nation that is actually concerned about its people should know that a population of 20 million people who do not have anything to do is a disaster. It's a problem.
Yeah. And to make it clear, actually, I'll just say this in passing because I know people who might end up watching this, say for instance in Canada, when you say, oh, they're not working, just to be clear, they're not on any social support from the government.
Thank you so much for Larry for that clarification. That means nobody, that's a simple truth.
Nobody gets such in Nigeria.
Nobody.
And I don't know of any African country where you get such from the government. In fact, to worsen the matter, during COVID, right, there was all the palliative measure things that was put in place by different international organizations. You find that those things still never got to the right people because politicians were saving them for campaign against the next elections. Let's not even get into that. That's another disaster.
That's that kind of worms. Don't let us see what we can do.
So now, out of the people that are employed, 35 million people, right, that are gainfully employed. Gainfully, we're not talking about
whether they're well paid.
Right. That's where I'm going.
That's another level.
So I think in that regard, we should be talking about the minimum wage, right? And you mentioned the data to me also, so I kind of put it together. The minimum wage is a disaster. To say it is a disaster is like you've said nothing really. In 2012, for instance, the minimum wage in Nigeria was 18,000 naira. And mind you, 18,000 naira in 2012 was $114 per month. Yeah. And okay, when you say minimum wage, do you have to clarify that to a Canadian or North American? Because minimum wage is not per hour. Because if you say, oh, $114 per hour, then you're balling, But $114 per month. 2018, the minimum wage was still 18,000. And by that time, it was an equivalent of $59 per month. By 2020, it became $30,000. And then that became $84 per month. By 2024, where we're at right now, it's still $30,000. And right now it is $32 USD per month. How do you survive on that? In the current Nigeria, how do you survive on that?
Well, you also have to, when it comes to dollar and naira, basically, at least the only hope you want to give to yourself as a Nigerian is that you don't buy in dollars, basically. However, for this set of people, basically, you have to live the lowest quality of life. And when I mean the lowest quality of life is that you just don't think anything extra for yourself, basically. And look, to make the matter worse, some of those people we are talking about are fathers and mothers. They have children, you understand?
Right.
It's a system where you now pass on poverty from generation to generation. And the only hope they have is that at least let's ensure that those people have a basic education. Right. And that's where the government comes in. At least we know that they would cut off the lineage of poverty from this whole system. So but the reality about the minimum wage in Nigeria is that people have to live the lowest. I mean, when I mean lowest, that means that face me house in Nigeria. That means that's what is even possible. That means even if we could be able to pay that rent, that means that you cannot talk about 3 square meals. When we're talking about I think you talk about meal balanced diet, yeah, eating the right food. So it's out of mind for you to even talk about eating balanced diet, even out of mind to say you're eating 3 square meal. It's
Right.
that just eat what is available. So that is the challenge. And whenever you have people who are living in that with that quality of life, health challenges, and
Right.
it's so
Right.
that's where we are as a country today. We have to we have to live based on what the quality of life, your quality of life would be dependent on what you can actually have. And that's where we are
Right.
as a country.
Right.
So,
And even if it's what you can achieve or what you can earn as an individual that determines your quality of life, I think that also is significantly based off of what is the inflation rate you're dealing with as a nation. I take, for instance, now in Canada, if you lived in Canada in the last 2 years or even 3 years since COVID, inflation went as high as almost 10%. In some Western countries, it went a little over that. But that's like hell broke loose at 10%. Because for real, I imagine, paying extra 10% for almost everything on the average. Of course, you will have some categories in goods and services that, are high and some low. But on the average, paying 10% more, that's a lot. But the inflation in Nigeria is another different ballgame.
Yeah.
What are the values like?
As we speak today, we talked about it also the other time. For the first quarter of this year, we are still going around 33%.
Holy moly!
And I don't think that is normal for any nation to be operating at 33%.
32%. Yeah.
I think as we speak today, Canada is still single digits, right?
Right now, I think we're less than 3% actually, which is like the average that is.
So what that means, and that reflects on the minimum wage. If you remember, we talked about it 2018, it's more than 14 and higher, and 2024 it's like 32.
Right.
So that means that your purchasing power
is reducing.
So you can't think. So that's the challenge about living at that level of life in Nigeria. You cannot even aspire anything.
Aspire to refire.
There's no aspiration. The dreams are dead. Just make sure that you're able to meet the basics of like the clothing, shelter, and housing. That's even so. There's nothing like you want to have a dream for something. You want to plan for your children. You want to go on vacation. There's nothing like that. So that's the reality. Basically.
Well, I never went on vacation until I left Nigeria.
And that's the challenge also. For every society, I know we've talked about this before. You would be shocked also that we don't have an egalitarian society where the difference between the poor and the rich. You told me today that even if you're not making so much money in Canada, you don't look like as if you're gone. You still, you understand.
No.
So the major problem, that the way you're saying it, that yet still, you still have those people at the upper class of that society who, like, they don't even spend naira. They spend in dollars. You understand? So for those kind of people, they cannot relate. And so when you have a society where you have people at the upper class who cannot relate with what these people we just described are, basically, then that society is not going to move forward. Basically, you cannot even think about increasing their salary because you cannot relate with them. Then what is also happening is that the people in the middle class, looking at the current economic system, are forced to also move to the lower class. So you now have the middle class being depleted every day.
Right. This is what I was talking to someone on the podcast recently, and I called it's the problem of the overprivileged class. Because the politicians, generally, even across Africa, they're very overprivileged. And I'm even sorry to say, in a country like Canada, our current crop of politicians are a lot of overprivileged people. And when you're overprivileged, what it does to you, right, is you're detached from the reality of the common man.
Thank you.
And in fact, in a place like Nigeria, right, your routes are determined. Where you work is kind of enclosed together with where you live. So you don't see the ghettos and see that the larger population are actually living through hell. and then you come out and you spew rubbish on national TV because you think everything is fine. But I think it's not even a question of ignorance as much as it's a willful ignorance, because you choose to be ignorant, especially if you're a leader. Part of what is required of you is being visionary and being able to know what is on ground. Right. But that's not the case. The other thing I was going to mention is, so by every standard, I can almost say I grew up in rural Nigeria. I grew up in Malaysia, right? It's a rural Nigeria. It's densely populated compared to most places. But you also find that the less privileged set of people, a lot of times also they come with a lot of wrong choices. Like as the dirt poor person who impregnates the girl on the street. The child to the civil servant, for the most part, not always, would not do that. But the one from an uneducated home, no privileges whatsoever, she's the one who's going to get pregnant for someone who has no job. Or he's just a bus driver, a conductor in our kind of environment. And then you find it passes down the generations. And it's the same in several countries, right? You see two sisters pregnant out of wedlock. You've almost shot yourself in the foot already. It would take a lot more to restore you. And I think, economic problems, somehow it has a way that it goes hand in hand with a social degradation of mind also. And then you can't envision what a future could look like for you. Yeah. I don't know what you think about that. You grew up in Lagos, you're a city boy.
I grew up in Lagos, but also because of looking at the way we also grew up, I went to a boarding house, for example. So you meet everybody from every class of life. You understand? Right. People who came from the city, people who came from, Australia, Ibadan, we could relate with those mindset. But for Larry, the simple truth is that for every of this problem we've itemized right now, education is the key. I served in Cross River, for example. That's the national, for example, for Canadians who are watching this podcast who don't understand what NYC means.
Oh, right. That's
NYC,
a national
the National
service.
Youth Service Corps. So it's a mandatory 1 year service after you graduate from university. And, I did that in Cross River State in Nigeria. And, I served in a village. And I can tell you what you just described where you grew up is just the typical life of anybody in that village. And so as a serving copper in that place, one of the things I ensure, aside from teaching them, is that to ensure them that you can cut off this generation of pattern from yourself. You can think outside the box. Right. There's so much. And so at that level, I saw a lot of them. One of them, I think somebody gets an admission calling me, uncle, I got an admission. Yeah, that's it. So I'm probably somebody else would have come to that village and also educated them. Probably they don't understand that there's a bigger life outside there. Right. You might never know what will happen to those kids.
Right. And that was why they designed the program, even though I think it has lost its purpose, right? Because bribery and corruption and the unequal strata in the society has actually made it lose its purpose. But the original purpose is so that a kid or a graduate from Lagos can go into some interior part of the East or in the North and be able to show them how to dream. But sadly, I think
that the system is also
the system is rigged, and also you have a lot of irresponsible people who also go to those villages and start sleeping with those girls. We saw that, right, when we were in national service.
Definitely.
Yeah,
so
they just see it.
That's another level. It's also the same set of people you talked about. It's a cycle. There's those people at the level of your exposure and also your moral values is also a function of your basic family you're from. You understand? True. So let's even take religion out of this place. It's just the basic moral standards. Also, it also stems from where you're from. You start from the family. So I think that in all of this, we are still talking about that. Except these people are exposed to a large extent, you can't help them. Right. You can only act based on the level of knowledge
Very true.
You can't act beyond your knowledge. You can manage the level. You can manage something that you don't have an idea about. And so I still believe strongly that it's a level. As a matter, if I have any opportunity to speak to any politician in Nigeria today, like one of the major investments that we need to do in Nigeria is education. I'm not even talking about the city. I'm talking about the villages. You want to cut off that,
The cycle.
that cycle,
Right.
and the only way you can cut off that cycle is ensuring that people understand what it means, to do it.
Okay.
Well,
I know you're enjoying this conversation right now and can't wait to get back into it. But if you're getting some value from this conversation, I think it's a good time to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also follow me at Reevaluate with Fola on social media. That's on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for more conversations like this. So let's get back into the conversation. The other thing you're going to find with poor education or poor infrastructure and job opportunities, employment opportunities, if only 35 million out of 70 million would only get employed, then you might as well leave Exhibit A.
right in front of me.
Right? And it does this thing to your mind, because I remember being in the university and you put in the grind. Man, it took a lot of work, right, for us to even get anything out of school. You put in the grind every day, going to classes, living through hell, no power supply, no water sometime. You can't even have a shower in the morning because there was a water outage. There is no well to fetch from. You can't even use the bathroom. Man, you save that thing for days going. But you're looking at, okay, if I can only graduate here and try to make as good grades as possible, I will likely come out of this problem. But there was also that thing in you that thinks, oh man, how many unemployed people are out there? And that's why from university days, I always said, you remember, right?
I remember.
Living in the hostel, I always said, then, like,
Yeah, not going to
man,
stay
not
this
me
country.
in Nigeria. So now there is a brain drain. That's what everybody has been talking about. And I think the brain drain is across a lot of places in the world, but in Africa is mostly in the sub-Saharan Africa that you have the brain drain coming into the Western world. You're in the human resources.
Yeah.
Even though I know you're not speaking for any company that you've worked with or working with right now, you're speaking as yourself. Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But how bad is it, the brain drain? Nigerians call it Japa.
It's crazy, and I'll tell you, in the last from 2020 after the pandemic, it was, people didn't understand that those opportunities exist. Only few people,
Right.
pre-pandemic,
right?
Yeah, it's only few people, but. No, post-pandemic, it was like the world now became a global village. Everybody just felt like,
So the pandemic woke people up, you think?
out of the country.
Well, because the universities were locked down for goodness, a year plus, right? No jobs. You couldn't work from home because the internet could not support. There was no power supply for people to even work from home, right? That was how bad it was.
Yeah, that's how crazy it was. So at that time, a lot of people started realizing that outside, you can actually work outside your current place. For example, you can see that's when tech industry started, pulling people. You have people being employed from UK. So a lot of people, as at that time, when you had board meetings, they would tell you that you have to come to work physically. And so post-pandemic was an high, even pandemic was an high opener. Like, see, anywhere in the world is a global village. You can connect to anybody. So what started happening at that point in time is that people started leaving their jobs. I can tell you a lot of functions. I told you, IT folks, medical doctors.
Right.
You can have for a whole department can actually resign a day, and you just get to your workplace and they'll tell you, as Aisha, that's one of the bad side of our job. They tell you that the whole of IT departments have resigned,
especially in IT.
IT, also medical health, that
right.
The doctors.
Right.
We have datas, surrounding that. So that's how crazy, we call it Japa. We call it Japa.
So this is interesting. So you mentioned health, and we were talking about the data. So I put it together here. In health and finance and banking and project finance and finance structuring, you called it high-level professions.
Mhm.
In 2021 to 2022, about 44,000 Nigerians migrated to the UK only for study. We're not even
Study.
talking about Canada or the
Canada,
United
yeah.
States now.
Mhm.
In 2022 alone, it showed that about 22,000 Nigerians immigrated to Canada.
That's true.
So I'm not surprised that a whole department or a whole set of medical doctors resigned in 1 year. Now let's talk about the medical field, because I think it's probably, if not the same as the number of people leaving the IT industry.
It's well, we can say they're a little bit higher because the challenge about medical doctor is it's a global problem. We have a number of medical professionals who are needed all over the world. Basically, we're not even talking about UK now. We're not even talking about
even
Canada.
here, right?
We're talking about US, UK.
It's a global thing.
So IT quite for some. It's only for some niche. It's not all like it's
Right.
not. So a little bit. You can actually, if you want to rate it in Nigeria as we speak today, you will say health professional number one. Then you can say IT next.
I see.
Yeah, but health professional, it's one of the professions that has a high flight. We call it flight risk. So if you have a company and you have doctors, for example, you probably have an hospital, you come to a point where during your employment process, you have discussions, open discussions that when are you planning to leave?
Is that right?
That's how crazy.
So what if I say I'm leaving next year? Would you employ me?
Because you only have few left. I have to plan with you. So I have to plan with you. That means at that point, so people were not honest about it before, and you are deceiving yourself. The employer is deceiving him or herself.
Right.
The employee is deceiving themselves. So you now have this severance process that is so painful. I've employed you, I've invested in you, then you're living outside the country. So that has occurred over and over again. And so they have to come to a point where I say, this is a pandemic in Nigeria. We have to live with it. So can we start having honest discussion with our employees? Right. So I've had, if I want to employ, young folks, for example, probably graduate trainees, we need to have, behavioral assessment that would assess probably these people are planning to leave the country. We have to plan with that, or probably not even employ them at all.
So that's in hopes that you even think people will say the truth.
People say so, but for medical profession, for example,
this almost guaranteed.
You understand? That even if they tell you that they don't have the plan, just assume in your head that they're going to leave. So you have to plan with that. So it's better that they even have this discussion with you so that you can plan appropriately that this person is leaving next year. Have to start planning for a new set of doctors that will come into the system. So that's the reality of how bad these things are for this profession we talked about.
So that's interesting. I looked up the data actually for doctors. They say 16,000 doctors left Nigeria within 5 years, the last 5 years. And this is a funny data. I don't know how true it is. You were showing me this data that approximately it takes about 21,000 USD to train a doctor in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Did it take $21,000 to train an engineer like us in Nigeria?
Definitely. Well, definitely. But I'm married to a medical professional, and at least to a large extent, there's a lot of investment when it comes to medical field. There are practicals, you have to attach them, their equipment, which are really expensive, basically. But the reality is that this data might not be so accurate to a large extent, because you cannot say, you cannot say this or that about this data. But the fact is that we know, both of us know, that it takes a lot of investment to train the medical doctor in Nigeria.
So we're seeing 16,000 doctors left Nigeria within the last 5 years. It takes about 21,000 on the average to train one medical doctor. That data is subjective. And then the UN data shows that a country needs one doctor to 500 persons. In Nigeria, what do we have in Nigeria?
We have 1 to 10,000.
1 to 10,000.
Yeah. So that's
So what's the hope that you wouldn't die if you have a malaria in
Nigeria? You have to be healthy. You have to be healthy. Or if you are not healthy in Nigeria, you're on your own. Even with your money, You understand that? That's the reason why even you see the people at the upper class. You've seen some people at the upper class leave Nigeria. You wonder, you still have some people who are leaving Nigeria because they are looking for better hopes, and you have seen people who leave Nigeria because of they've seen a situation where they have the money, but they can't have access to good medical care. You understand? Yes. And they feel like, I can't put my family in danger. I have the money. I can get this medical care somewhere else in the world. And you see people who would just, for that sake, it was for that reason. You have had people in the recent times in Nigeria who got drowned. I don't know whether you saw the story.
Oh, right. The one that got drowned.
Just so
I know.
As basic as CPR techniques.
Right.
You understand?
I was thinking about that issue, and I thought, if it was here, even though I complain about the Canadian system, but whether we like it or not, if you live in the West, right, if you live in North America, for instance, you're still within the first 1% in the world. You're fine. But now when you compare the system with itself and you compare the trajectory of that system, that's where you begin to draw inferences, and you can actually complain. And it makes sense to complain in that sense. But people get drowned. Yeah. Now I asked, of course, there's no Coast Guard to go look for them. And of course, if there was a Coast Guard to look for them, they would not have died.
It's as basic. It's even, these things are avoidable. We joke about it. I tell people, I joke about this. I say that a lot of deaths that happens in Nigeria, God doesn't know about it. Because they're avoidable. Let's even start from, basic understanding of, even you're entering into a boat, you must actually put safety.
Life jackets.
So, but that's just a diversion. But the major crux of the matter is that for the health sector in Nigeria, it's a pandemic.
That's a disaster.
It's a disaster.
One doctor to 10,000 people.
Basically. And even if the doctor have enough, appliances to even treat you, you understand.
The manpower is not even there.
Definitely, we can trust our doctors because at least they are going outside the country and they're doing well, but they don't even have the manpower. They don't have the equipment, basically. So,
I think that was why they tried placing a ban on doctors leaving Nigeria. I don't know how that panned out, actually.
Well, they're trying.
They're still trying?
It's you can't totally, I think one of the things I've found out recently is that in the past you have, doctors getting something, you can travel. I can't remember what they call it in the civil service, but, you can give like a 1 year out of office.
Oh, right. The one we never returned from.
So people would go out of the country, and still be earning their salaries, not the fact that you have been. You also understand that they pay people for housemanship in Nigeria.
True.
You're learning and you're being paid. You understand?
So that's done everywhere.
The government, no, it's done everywhere. But you enjoy, you see your doctors, still staying in the country, for example, and giving the services. But what the balance to this is that if the government are putting so much effort in ensuring these people are trained, why can't you create a structure for them to stay? You are losing. You are losing. You are losing on both ends. You are losing them. You're putting money into them. There's no structure to keep them. So you can't put money into those things and not put a structure for them to wait. So you are losing big time.
Yeah, and I think this is where what we're talking about earlier, right? That the private sector alongside the government need to work together. And I think that's where you can just say, work together. There needs to be a vision. And then policies need to be put in place to support that vision. And that's what people can actually play with. In the private sector, at the university level, or even primary school level, because the investment is a loss to everybody on the long run. In fact, it's a loss to the crazy politician that steals money from government every time. He just doesn't
understand.
I'm going to talk from every angle of my mouth. Why did that crazy politician go to the UK to do an organ transplant, and now he got himself a sentence? Why? Because the system is not there. Because at the end of the day, I think each individual will be the first beneficiary of whatever system we create for ourselves. Even in a home setting, right? You will be the first beneficiary of the system you create in your home. arrange your home, you will be the first person to enjoy it. Leave it in disarray, you will be the first person to suffer for it.
Just simple as
Right?
that.
Repair your sofa, then it might not pinch your bum when you sit on it. If you don't, then you might have a scratch in your bum. As simple as that. But you cascade that problem to a national level. It is a loss to everyone. You invest, money was invested on me in court, even though I didn't think it's a lot, by the government, by time was invested on me by lecturers who taught me in school. But man, I was just waiting every day in school. It was like I was counting down. And the goal was to get out. And the goal right now for many people is still to get out. So I think there is a brain drain, which is a valid thing across Africa. And now you're thinking about, economic integration for Africa, but you don't even have manpower for economic integration. It's almost like you're sentenced to a disaster as a continent. So when I think about the hope for the continent with respect to this, I think this is where we have to learn from countries. And a classic example would be like India. India had an exodus also of all their brains from IIT, which is a very powerful university, right? But then many of them began to bring back investment into India. If you look at their fintech, for instance, in India, it grew sporadically.
So well.
Right. But of course, India is still suffering economically by the common man till date. But at least they were able to revolutionize different sectors in their economy. Hopefully, policies across Africa or even in Nigeria will be able to facilitate such. But what worsens that now is insecurity in Nigeria. Like, honestly, it's one of the reasons I am most scared to go to Nigeria because...
I told you that aside from the upper class persons in Nigeria, leaving Nigeria as a result of bad healthcare, and one of the things why people would leave Nigeria is terrorism and security problems, so to say. And we just talked about it. The first thing we talked about in the start of the session was that whenever you have a gap between the upper class and the lower class, that's
a lot of social vices.
That's a social vices. So if we are talking about policies that would ensure that the private sector and the government work hand in hand to drive economic growth, it starts from the government. I'm not saying that the people don't have the responsibility. I agree totally with you. You understand? But people will be people, except they are defining rules that that helps you shape your behavior. You don't leave people to want to do things themselves. You have to create.
That's why you need leaders.
You need leaders. You create a policy. There's a problem. You have to create a policy, because I'm an HR person and I understand that if you don't have a policy, if you don't have a procedure to do something, you cannot just assume that people will do the right thing. And so it stems from good leadership. And so that's one thing we hope for as Nigerians. We are Nigerians, so you're Canadian. But you're hoping that one day we'll get a leader that would have this vision. You talk about vision and we'll be able to drive that. So I totally agree with Folari that it's not just about the government, but the government needs to start this process. A good leader who has a vision needs to start this process for that to happen.
Right. So, quick question for you. What factor in our system is it that really helps Nigerians in your own appraisal of the matters? And I'll give you the reason why I say that. About 60% of Nigerians living, for instance, in the US have at least a bachelor's degree. In fact, there are homes where most Nigerian immigrants in the US and even in Canada, the couple have at least a bachelor's degree. You even find homes, the couple have doctorate degrees, both of them. In spite of all the problems we go through as a people, bad social amenities, infrastructure, terrible, we don't even have respect for each other. We disregard ourselves, to be honest. What thing is there even in our system that really brings that Nigerian spirit, that makes Nigerians do well abroad? Is it problems, or is the problems that really helped us?
Probably I would say I think a typical Nigerian is actually the person that can adapt to situation. And I will use the word, our own cliche, never say die spirit. We have that tendency to say, see, I have to solve this problem. I don't have all the resources that it takes, but I have to get out of this problem myself. So, and it starts from, look at the educational system. You look at how you enjoyed your PhD in Canada. Just imagine you had that system at the bachelor's level. You can imagine how well you would have enjoyed education.
Could have told my parents that's the reason I didn't make a distinction.
So for you, even with that, you had a good result in university. You did well out of school. How did you do it? You have to find a way around it. There's no excuse. You got to classes. There's no chair. I have to find, whether you sit on the window or you sit by the side. There's just something that it stems from the way you were raised up. You have to just find a solution to the problem. And so you get to society where there is a good structure, and probably there are some other vices. You still have to find a solution to other problems that exist outside that. And so for me, I think that's it starts from every of our life structure of that tenacity. You just have to make the good out of the bad.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's where the Nigerian grit comes in. I think that, like you say, never say die. You just keep grinding until. Yeah. And I think if I am right about this, Deed, I think there was one time that we were also rated one of the most hopeful nations on earth.
Yeah. It's always been
ego better.
Funny enough, like this is interesting. I also feel that this spirit is one of the reasons why our government also take us for granted. I tell people don't understand that they throw things as you just bring in the policy. Just feel like Nigerians will adapt. I feel that same thing. It's interesting, but you'll be shocked. You understand? It's only Nigeria. If you know the data, probably you might not be conversant with it. Fuel prices rather was increased from around 160 to 600
per liter.
And the first few months, everybody will be like, it's not possible. People will fight. My brother, I'm buying it today, and nobody's dying. I keep wondering how. You understand?
So I think Nigerians
they just believe that at the end of the day you would shout, but you would adapt.
They were like frogs; they could cook us to death.
So I don't know which one is the good side of the whole discussion, but it's the fact that yes, you found out that we do well outside the country, which is true. Because of that, we also feel that I think we take a lot of can I use the word shit? We take a lot of shit from our government because they believe that these guys, they will be fine. Leave them. When you're just do it. You understand? So I don't know which one actually right now is actually good for us, basically.
Yeah, I was doing a monologue actually recently about a secret report by the RCMP that came out that Canadians are likely going to protest when they find out how broke they are as a people. Say likely to protest. It first of all assumes a position of ignorance that Canadians don't know how broke they are. The second is maybe they will protest. But the other thing with Nigeria right now, I know this is a very big conversation. The other thing with Nigeria, not just Nigeria, Africa, is that protests are squashed by the government. So even if you complain forever, they're going to send someone to warn you to start with. God bless you if they send someone to warn you. The reporters, the media is also biased in their own ways as well. So the media has become a sabotaged institution by the government. Labor force and labor organizations have also become, when I say labor force, I mean the union now.
I get you.
They become tools by the government. So every angle you look at it, the common man is actually squeezed between all this corrupt establishments in the systems. So if you want to protest, you will also remember the massacre at the toll gate in 2020. You want to protest, you remember 2010, how that Save Nigeria protest was sabotaged. You want to protest, you remember 1993, the austerity measure protest. You want to protest, you remember 1989, the Ali Must Go protest, 1979 now. You want to protest, you remember way back, even prior to independence, you will remember Aba Women's Riot of 1929. You will remember Ali Must Go of 1947. each one of those times, the military is unleashed on Nigerians. Let's not even talk about South Africa. I have all the data. I can also chat about that. Let's not talk about other places like Uganda since the days of Museveni. It has become our pattern that come what may, people have to adapt. You don't adapt, they would unleash hell on you as a people. They will kill you in your hundreds and everybody will go back home. That's the sad reality of the nation. And I must say also a kind of thing like that exists in Canada. Let's not go into that detail.
Well, you know Canada better than me. So, but I also feel that, and that's the place of outliers. You know, for every society, you should have outliers that would decide that amongst these odds would have to come out, and the challenge is over and over again. When suppression comes, you have less of those outliers, and that's the greatest fear for Nigeria. For example, you have few people who would say, see, the likes of Fela, who would say, I would rather die in the prison than to keep quiet. So they've seen the system over time. That at the end of the day, look at Fela today. He tried his best. He's gone. You can only remember him and say, yeah, great fella, So, but for every society, like we've said, we need outliers. We need outliers also in government who would actually think differently and say, see, I don't care. Like, even if, if you have to, sometimes even if I have to lose my life for this, that's the situation where Nigeria has come to. But I just also feel that we should also be careful the way we see the tenacity spirit of Nigeria, so that we'll not actually be going back. We have that tenacity spirit. It's good. I think it's better we use it positively than negatively. That's what I think personally.
Right. So you actually escorted me to the airport when I was leaving Nigeria. I was surprised, my phone reminded me, Google Photos reminded me about that. Man, I looked at that crazy photo. We're going to pop that photo up. The photo is going to show in editing before we release this. This is really like boys to men, looking at how we both looked that time. Yeah, my wife would say she meant there's a Following 2.0. Yeah, I agree with that. This is 2.0. Yeah. This one that has beards now. People ask me about beard. Wait, you keeping beards too? When people ask me, I just say it's puberty. It's yours puberty.
Definitely. Like, we didn't have beards, no, definitely. But we had very small goatee as at that time.
So I think enjoyment makes the beard grow too, right? Is that right?
Well, maybe. Let me assume, actually. But well, it's when you look at those days, I think the good thing, and we've talked about it before, is that you can laugh at it because somehow at this level of your life you could say that you're doing well for yourself. But it's a different case for somebody else out there, and that's why we're having this, to ensure that we drive a societal change, basically. Right. Like when I saw that picture, I laughed like.
But that's even a better picture. There were worse ones.
Days of footer. I remember there was a very funny picture. You were sitting on the bunk. You remember that picture? It's. I still have that picture.
Do I have it?
You were sitting. Still that particular green shirt.
I must have looked like a skeleton.
That time, when I saw, there was a picture. We have a couple of those pictures, but it's just interesting that we're able to adapt.
It is interesting. To be honest, I'm grateful to God, really. And, we've talked about this extensively too. We meet each other now. It's like, we're both doing well. I see many of our colleagues too doing well. People like DJ, right? And, brother. I always say that I believe, among several other reasons, but I believe in the power of three things. One is the power of faith in God. And the second is the power of education. And the third is the power of meaningful relationships in one's life. Like, look at us now. Last time we met each other was 2015, 9 years ago. But we can still connect. And it's like, I saw you yesterday.
Yeah.
But those were meaningful relationships. And I think you find that kind of bonding when there is a common hardship. Sometimes that's I like to call it the wealth and poverty. The poverty in wealth is that many times you're actually you're bankrupt of those meaningful relationships. Your social connections is just awful. And I look at that, I taught at Dow doing teaching assistant and instructor for many years. And you look at the way students interact. And I compare it with where I'm coming from, and I feel like, man, I pity all of you. You would not have a friend when you graduate. And I find many of them, that's what happens. Because most times, all they had is drinking buddies and just turning up on Friday nights. But we connected on deeper issues. Matters about faith, matters about education, that pursuit, that grit, the tenacity, the resilience. And then you have that meaningful relationship coming out of it. I totally believe if anyone is bankrupt of those three, you should really reconsider your hope in life. And what are you living for? What's the purpose? 10 years from now, what would it look like for you? What will loneliness in your 40s and 50s look like? But I think we have that. It is the blessing. It is the wealth in poverty. What I see around here is the poverty in wealth most times. The other thing like it, I'm talking too much now, but the other thing like it is, I look at immigrants, for instance, take Nigerians or Africans and people from the Middle East, Indians, in engineering, where I was teaching in the university during grad school. You find that the people who quickly quit and drop out of the engineering program to go do humanities and arts, they are the ones who have abundance, in quote. Sorry to say, the average Canadian, the average Westerner. The immigrant knows this is the only hope he has. There's no home to go back to. I better face this future and get something out of it.
I'm done.
Or I'm dead. And you don't finish that thing. That's the only passport you have to naturalize, to get a permanent residence and become a citizen. But the one who has all those just things like, oh, you know what, I'm just going to work for in the meantime, and never returns to school. When he returns, he just does some weird course that's going to take 2 years to finish. And then you graduate, you see the huge discrepancy between the salaries and the living standard. And then it looks like, oh, these immigrants are coming, are stealing our resources. But I'm saying a lot. How did you transition from engineering to HR? What would summarize engineering? You studied metallurgical engineering.
Metallurgical engineering. And so, for me, as at the time, going back to power of meaningful relationship, and, we became friends at a part 2. I can't remember part 2.
First year,
yeah. First year. I could remember vividly, as at that time, I was personally struggling, you understand, in terms of engineering. For me, I didn't want to do engineering. I'm one of those few people that's got engineering. But as a part 4, as a part 2, we met, and, one of the things I gathered from friendship between myself, yourself, me, DG right now, is that I just have to do what I have to do. I have to get the best out of it. And I have to focus and say, let me learn whatever engineering would teach me. Then probably over time, I would figure out what is really my passion. You understand? And so I had to face it from part 2 that, see, guy, you have to focus on engineering. So as a part 4, I had mentors around me who I saw did well in HR, and I realized that I was a people's person. I relate well with people, and that's just what the basis. So as at NYSC, I started writing professional exams. You understand? And so I made up my mind that, see, I was not going to waste my time. So, when people, NYSC, I saw folks, they were spending all their allowances. Though probably, I can say that probably had, support system around me, people also, but I did not spend most of my allowance. We call it allowance.
The allowance, yes.
And I actually used my money to actually register for exam because I knew clearly. And so the first job I got in Zenith Bank was because I had that exam, not because of my. So engineering was also a good basis that I was an engineering student, but I'm writing. So, but I'm very sure if I didn't have that professional exam, they won't consider me as at that point in time. You understand? So I already made up my mind that I was going to best. So when I'm doing HR as I speak today, my analytical skills was actually gotten from university. If I decided I was not going to graduate, I might not get that skill, basically. That's an edge from a normal social science student or and art students who just went straight to school to read, to study human resources. I did a lot of mathematics in school. Just imagine crazy engineering courses. And so for me, I had mentors, and I decided to look inward to say, I'm accepting what I'm actually currently doing in university, but what's the best thing? What's my niche, basically? And I actually enjoyed that early enough, and I decided actually to write exams. So my resources, professional exams, having sessions with mentors was a guidance towards human resources. So my first job, to now make it interesting, I got another job that gave me a great training system. That was when Nigeria's system was still good. I was exposed that was in UAC. I was exposed to end-to-end HR processes. And so if you don't have that really, again, as we speak today, because organizations are much profitable oriented, you don't have that luxury of time. For my first 3 months, I was not doing anything. I was just learning, and I was being paid salary for that. You understand? So I was taken through the whole process of HR, and I learned so much at that point in my, that was early years of my career, but that built the portfolios and some of the jobs I got after that. And so that was just the basic
wow.
Basic
it's an incredible journey. Did you travel to write your exams? I think you went to Ghana.
At some point I went to Ghana.
Right.
At some point my first exam, that was a local exam. I did international in Ghana. The first local exam, I moved to Port Harcourt from Cross River. They were not writing the exam in Cross River at that point in time, so I had to move to Port Harcourt to write the exam. Wow. Then the second exam, I made the professional exam, PHRI, which is international. I had to go outside the country to write the exam, and so those were sacrifices. So I had to sacrifice. It was much of if you don't do this right now, the same way, you would have to blame yourself for that.
Totally.
You can blame the Nigerian system, blame the educational system, but nobody cares. That's the simple truth about Nigeria. Nobody cares.
I think that's actually a simple truth about life. And I always hate to say this, especially when I find younger people. I hate to say younger people these days.
Because you're not getting
old. It just ages me. I hate to say that.
Okay.
But, when I say to younger folks, like, nobody bloody cares. Nobody cares. And you have to learn that in life, that nobody cares and nobody should give a cent. Because you are the one who needs to live through life, pull something meaningful out of life. And that's where, you can start talking about, have a vision for yourself, carve out a purpose that you want to live by, stay through and be committed to your purpose. Break your purpose down into goals, break your goals down into tangible outcomes, bring aspiration alongside that, dream, power of ambition, focus, and hold yourself accountable. People will say, I need someone to hold me accountable. Like, can you hold anyone accountable? Like, goodness, you're going to hold yourself accountable. And I think those are things that we learned and that really help us as a group of people.
Therefore, what you just said, I can't overemphasize it. I won't say I'm from, probably my dad is from middle class. I won't say, I could tell you that probably I should be able to lean on those systems around me to say that, I have excuses. But one of the first lessons I've learned, growing up in my family was that you are responsible for your life. You understand? And so when I look at this generation, like you said, of young people, and that's one of the things we need to really also sort out, aside from a lot of, disasters we have in Nigeria. We have a lot of young people in Nigeria today who believe that Nigeria is their problem, and they sit in their comfort zones. It's not even a comfort zone right now.
It's a hell zone.
It's a hell zone, and say that,
Right.
And so if there's anything that you want to help young people, to do, is that nobody cares. Like we said, you have to take, you have to be responsible. You understand? So those days when I was writing my exam, I could be spending my money too. You understand? People were spending money. It's not that I didn't want to spend my money.
You could drink beer with it if
beer.
you want.
As a matter of fact, I served in a place where beer was
in abundance.
In abundance. I could decide to be drinking beer, or I could decide to buy new shirts. You understand? I could decide to basically, but I just realized that it's at the end of the day, it's me, basically. It's me, myself. Yeah, I can't lean on my parents or lean on my siblings, or you understand. I have to be responsible. So it's a big problem in Nigeria, and I don't know how we want to crack that, but a lot of young people believe, you have cousins who would call you, you want them to do something, and they don't want to even take the leap to start something themselves. And so even if you pay for that, so
we deal with this issue a lot. But well, I think this is where we should put an end to it. Otherwise, I think we can chat for an eternity.
Yeah, true.
This is like old friends coming back together after so many years.
Yeah.
And, well, thanks for doing this with me.
Thank you so much, Larry. I'm grateful for this time with you. Yeah.
And thanks to that beautiful lady too, who's been switching behind the camera.
Thank you. I had a nice time. Trust me, actually, I had a nice time coming around. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.